The first bullet from Zachary Young's gun shattered the silence of the Montana wilderness as he crested the hill overlooking the churning waters of the Snake River. The year was 1878, and what he witnessed below sent ice through his veins despite the summer heat. A young woman, bound and being dragged toward the swollen riverbank by three rough-looking men. Sophia Sullivan had been certain her life would end today. The rope around her wrists cut into her flesh as she was pulled through the dirt, her captors laughing about how her body would never be found once the river carried it downstream. She had stopped pleading hours ago, knowing it only amused them. Now, she focused her remaining strength on digging her heels into the ground, buying precious seconds though she wasn't sure why. There was no one for miles who would hear her if she screamed. "Stop fighting, girl. You're only making it harder on yourself," snarled the tallest of her captors, yanking the rope so hard she fell forward onto her knees. The second man chuckled. "Maybe we should have some more fun with her before we finish this." "We ain't got time," replied the third, a stocky man with a jagged scar across his left cheek. "Mason said to get rid of her before sundown. She saw too much at the stagecoach robbery." "Mason ain't here," argued the second man, reaching for Sophia's torn blouse. She twisted away, her auburn hair falling across her face as she glared at him with fierce hazel eyes. 22 years of life had taught her stubbornness, if nothing else. "Touch me again, and I'll find a way to kill you, even in death," she spat. Feisty until the end, the scarred man laughed, yanking her toward the river's edge where the current ran dangerous and deep. That's when the shot rang out. Zachary's Mustang thundered down the hillside, dust kicking up behind them as he fired again, this time with deadly precision. The bullet sliced through the rope between Sophia and her captors, causing the men to stumble backward in shock. "What in the hell?" the tall man shouted, fumbling for his weapon. Zachary was already upon them, his duster billowing behind him like a predator's wings. At 26, he'd spent enough years as a bounty hunter to know how to make an entrance. His next shot caught the tall man in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground with a howl. The second man managed to draw his pistol, but Zachary was faster, putting a bullet through his gun hand. The third man, seeing the fate of his companions, turned to flee but found his path blocked by Zachary's horse. "I suggest you boys start running," Zachary said, his voice carrying the calm certainty of a man who didn't issue empty threats. "Unless you fancy feeding the vultures." The men scrambled away, helping their wounded comrade as they disappeared into the brush along the riverbank. Only then did Zachary dismount, approaching Sophia cautiously. Her dress was torn, her face smudged with dirt and marked with bruises, but what struck him most was the defiance still burning in her eyes. "You're safe now, miss," he said, holstering his gun and kneeling beside her. "May I?" He gestured to the remnants of rope still binding her wrists. Sophia nodded, studying the man before her. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with piercing blue eyes that contrasted with his sun-darkened skin. A few days' worth of stubble covered his strong jawline, and dark hair peeked out from beneath his wide-brimmed hat. "Thank you," she whispered as he gently freed her wrists. I thought they were going to." "No need to think on it now," Zachary interrupted softly, noting the raw skin where the ropes had cut into her. "What's your name?" "Sophia Sullivan." "Zachary Young," he replied, removing his canteen from his saddle. "Drink. Slowly." Sophia accepted the canteen with trembling hands, taking careful sips as he'd instructed. The water was warm, but felt like heaven on her parched throat. "Those men," she said between sips, "they were part of the Mason gang. They robbed the stagecoach I was traveling on yesterday, killed the driver and the guard." Her voice cracked. "I hid under a seat, but they found me when they were looting the coach. They've been dragging me around since then, deciding what to do with me." Zachary's expression darkened. The Mason gang had been terrorizing the Montana territory for months, leaving a trail of robberies and murders in their wake. "I've been tracking them for 2 weeks. Lost their trail yesterday until I heard them talking about coming to the river." He stood and helped Sophia to her feet. She swayed slightly, and he steadied her with a gentle hand on her elbow. "Can you ride?" he asked. "We should put some distance between us and them. They might come back with reinforcements." Sophia nodded, then winced as pain shot through her battered body. "I can ride. I grew up on a ranch outside of Helena." Zachary helped her onto his horse before mounting behind her. He was acutely aware of her body against his as she leaned back, exhaustion finally catching up to her. "My ranch is a day's ride north," he said, keeping his voice professional despite the unfamiliar warmth spreading through him at her proximity. "We'll stop there, get you patched up and rested. Then I can take you wherever you need to go." "I have nowhere to go," Sophia admitted quietly. "I was heading to my aunt's in Bozeman after my father passed. The stagecoach was supposed to get me there." Zachary guided his horse away from the river, choosing a path that would be difficult to follow. "I'm sorry about your father," he said, "and about what happened to you. But you're safe now, Miss Sullivan. I give you my word." As they rode away from the river, Sophia found herself trusting the stranger who had saved her life. There was something solid about him, something that made her feel secure despite everything she'd endured. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to close her eyes, lulled by the rhythm of the horse and the strength of the arms that encircled her. Zachary felt the moment she drifted to sleep, her body growing heavier against his chest. He adjusted his hold, ensuring she wouldn't fall, and pressed onward through the gathering dusk. The woman in his arms was a complication he hadn't anticipated when he'd set out after the Mason gang. But as he looked down at her face, peaceful now in sleep, he found he couldn't regret it. Night had fallen by the time they reached a small clearing beside a creek. Zachary reluctantly decided they would have to make camp. Pushing on in the darkness was too risky, especially with Sophia's condition. He carefully dismounted, then lifted her from the horse, surprised at how light she felt in his arms. Sophia stirred as he set her down on his bedroll. "Where are we?" she murmured, disoriented. "About 15 miles from where I found you," he answered, busying himself with gathering wood for a small fire. "We'll camp here tonight. I don't want to risk riding in the dark." Sophia sat up, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles. The events of the past 2 days crashed over her again, bringing a fresh wave of fear. "What if they find us?" Zachary paused in his work, meeting her gaze steadily. "They won't. But if they did, I'd protect you." There was no bravado in his voice, just a simple statement of fact that somehow reassured her more than any grand promise could have. Once he had a small fire going, Zachary rummaged through his saddlebags, producing jerky, hardtack, and a tin of coffee. "It's not much of a meal," he apologized, "but it'll keep your strength up." "It looks wonderful," Sophia said honestly, accepting her portion with grateful hands. She ate slowly, savoring each bite after nearly 2 days without food. As she ate, she studied her rescuer in the firelight. Zachary Young didn't look like the heroes in the dime novels she'd sometimes sneaked from her father's study. There was nothing flashy about him. His clothes were practical, his movements efficient. Yet there was an unmistakable competence in everything he did, from the way he'd handled his gun to how he'd built their fire in minutes. "How long have you been a bounty hunter?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. Zachary looked up from his coffee, surprise flickering across his features. "How'd you know that's what I am?" Sophia's lips curved into a small smile. "You said you'd been tracking the Mason gang. You're too well dressed to be a lawman, and you don't have the look of a vigilante about you." He chuckled, the sound warming something inside her. "Observant. I've been at it for about 4 years now. Before that, I worked cattle on my family's ranch. Still do, when I'm not chasing bounties." "Is that where we're headed? Your family's ranch?" "No," he replied, his expression sobering. "My parents died of influenza 2 winters ago. Left the place to me and my younger brother, Elijah. He helps run it while I'm away. It's just the 2 of us now." Sophia recognized the familiar pain of loss in his voice. "I'm sorry. My mother died when I was young. It was just my father and me until last month." She swallowed hard. Fever took him too. Their eyes met across the fire, a moment of shared understanding passing between them. Then Zachary cleared his throat and stood. "You should get some rest, Miss Sullivan. I'll keep watch." "Sophia," she corrected gently, "after what you've done for me, I think you've earned the right to use my given name." He nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "Sophia, then. And I'm Zachary." "Thank you, Zachary, for everything." She hesitated. "But where will you sleep?" "I'll be fine," he assured her, gesturing to his saddle. "Used to sleeping rough. You take the bedroll." Sophia wanted to argue but found herself too exhausted to put up much of a fight. As she settled into the bedroll, she watched Zachary position himself with his back against a tree, rifle across his knees, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "Zachary," she said softly, already drifting toward sleep. I'm glad you found me." His expression softened in the firelight. "So am I, Sophia. So am I." The next morning dawned clear and warm, sunlight filtering through the trees to dapple the ground around their small camp. Sophia awoke feeling stiff and sore, but rested for the first time in days. She sat up to find Zachary already awake, tending to a fresh fire with coffee brewing. "Morning," he said, offering her a tin cup of the strong, black liquid. "Sleep well." "Better than I expected to," she admitted, accepting the cup gratefully. The coffee was bitter but wonderfully hot. "How far to your ranch?" "If we make good time, we should be there by late afternoon," Zachary replied, packing up their meager camp with efficient movements. "Think you can handle the ride?" Sophia nodded, standing to test her strength. Her body protested, but she'd endured worse. Growing up on a ranch had made her resilient. "I'll manage." Zachary paused in his work, studying her with concern. "Your wrists need tending," he said, nodding toward the raw, red marks left by the ropes. He reached into his saddlebag and produced a small tin of salve. "It's not much, but it might help with the pain." His fingers were surprisingly gentle as he applied the salve to her wrists. Sophia found herself watching his face, noting the concentration in his eyes and the careful way he touched her, as if she might break. No one had treated her with such care since her father had fallen ill. "Thank you," she said softly when he finished. Zachary merely nodded, putting away the salve and offering her the last of his hardtack for breakfast. As they ate, he explained his plan. "We'll follow the creek north for a while, then cut east through Fuller's Pass. It's a longer route, but less likely to be watched if the Mason gang is looking for us." "Do you think they are?" "Looking for us, I mean." Zachary's expression hardened. "Those men I wounded will have rejoined the others by now. They know I saw their faces, and they know you can identify them. Mason isn't the type to leave loose ends." Fear knotted in Sophia's stomach. "So they'll come after us." "They might try," Zachary agreed. "But they won't find us if we're careful. And once we reach my ranch, you'll be safe. No one crosses onto Young property uninvited." There was steel in his voice that made Sophia believe him. As they mounted up and began their journey, she found herself studying the landscape with new eyes, alert for any sign of pursuit. The Montana wilderness stretched around them, beautiful but unforgiving, with rolling hills giving way to distant mountains capped with snow even in summer. They rode in companionable silence for much of the morning, Sophia seated in front of Zachary as before. Despite the circumstances, she found herself increasingly aware of his physical presence, the solid warmth of his chest against her back, the strength in the arms that occasionally brushed hers as he guided the horse. "Tell me about your ranch," she said eventually, partly to distract herself from these confusing new feelings. Zachary's voice warmed as he described the sprawling property his grandfather had claimed 40 years earlier. "We run about 300 head of cattle on 2,000 acres. Got a creek running through the north pasture that never runs dry, even in the worst drought. The main house isn't fancy, but it's solid. My father built it with his own hands when he married my mother." "It sounds wonderful," Sophia said, hearing the pride in his voice. "My father's ranch was much smaller. Just enough land for a few dozen cattle and some crops. After he died, I had to sell it to pay his medical debts." "That's a hard thing," Zachary said quietly. "A man's land is part of him." "Yes," she agreed, touched by his understanding. "That's exactly what it felt like selling a piece of him." She hesitated, then added, "That's why I was going to my aunt's. She offered me a place to stay while I decide what to do next." "What would you like to do, if you could choose anything?" The question caught Sophia by surprise. No one had asked her that in a long time. Her life for the past year had been consumed with caring for her father, then handling his affairs after his death. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "I always loved working with horses on our ranch. My father taught me to break and train them. I was good at it." "We could use someone with those skills," Zachary said, then seemed surprised at his own words. After a moment, he continued more carefully, "What I mean is, ranches all over the territory would value someone who knows horses." Sophia turned slightly to glance up at him. catching a glimpse of what might have been embarrassment on his face. The idea that this composed, confident man might feel flustered around her was oddly endearing. Their conversation was interrupted by Zachary suddenly reining in the horse, his body tensing behind her. "What is it?" Sophia whispered, alarmed by the change in him. "Riders," he said softly, nodding toward a ridge about half a mile ahead. 3 of them, moving fast. Sophia squinted, making out the distant figures against the sky. "The men from yesterday? Can't tell from here. But we're not taking chances." Zachary turned their horse, guiding it into a dense stand of pines that offered cover. They dismounted, and he led the animal deeper into the trees, where they would be hidden from view. "Stay here," he instructed, drawing his rifle. "If anything happens to me, take the horse and ride northeast. You'll hit the Yellowstone River. Follow it downstream, and you'll reach Fort Kearny in about 2 days." "I'm not leaving you," Sophia protested, her hand instinctively grabbing his arm. Zachary looked down at her hand, then at her face, something unreadable passing through his eyes. "I appreciate the sentiment, but I'd ride easier knowing you were safe." Before she could argue further, he moved silently toward the edge of the trees, positioning himself where he could observe the approaching riders without being seen. Sophia remained with the horse, heart pounding as she strained to hear any sound of conflict. Minutes stretched like hours until finally Zachary returned, relief evident in his posture. "Not our friends from yesterday," he reported. "Just traders heading for the fort. But we should move on. Stick to cover as much as we can." They continued their journey, now keeping to wooded areas and low ground where possible. By midday, the sun was beating down mercilessly, and they stopped by a small spring to rest and water the horse. Sophia knelt by the spring, splashing cool water on her face and neck. Her dress, already torn and dirty from her ordeal, clung uncomfortably to her skin in the heat. She became aware of Zachary watching her and looked up to find his gaze quickly shifting away. "Sorry," he muttered. "I was just thinking you might be more comfortable in different clothes when we reach the ranch. My mother's things are still there. She was about your size, I think." The offer touched Sophia deeply. "That's very kind. If you're sure you don't mind." "She'd have wanted them used," Zachary said simply. Then, changing the subject, "We should reach the ranch in a few hours. Elijah will have supper waiting. He's a better cook than me, which isn't saying much." "I'm a fair cook myself," Sophia offered. "My father always said my stew could bring a man back from the dead." The memory brought a smile to her lips, one of the first genuine smiles since her father's passing. Zachary found himself staring at that smile, struck by how it transformed her face. Even with dirt smudged on her cheeks and her hair in disarray, Sophia Sullivan was beautiful. The realization unsettled him. He'd sworn off entanglements after Catherine had left him for a banker from Helena 2 years earlier. His life as a bounty hunter didn't leave room for attachments. Yet as they mounted up to continue their journey, he couldn't deny the warmth that spread through him when Sophia settled against his chest once more. The afternoon sun was beginning its descent when they crested a hill and the Young ranch came into view. Nestled in a valley with mountains rising behind it, the main house stood solid and welcoming, smoke curling from its chimney. Several outbuildings surrounded it, a barn, bunkhouse, and what looked like a workshop. Cattle grazed in the distance, and a corral near the barn held several horses. "It's beautiful," Sophia breathed, taking in the peaceful scene. "Home," Zachary said simply, a note of pride in his voice. He spurred the horse forward, eager now that their destination was in sight. As they approached the main house, a tall, lean young man emerged onto the porch, shading his eyes against the sun. When he recognized Zachary, he raised a hand in greeting, then froze when he noticed Sophia. "That's Elijah," Zachary explained as they rode into the yard. "My brother." He wasn't expecting company. They dismounted, Zachary helping Sophia down with hands that lingered perhaps a moment longer than necessary on her waist. Elijah approached them, curiosity evident in his features, which resembled Zachary's though his hair was lighter and his build more slender. "Didn't expect you back for another week, Zach," Elijah said, his eyes moving between his brother and Sophia. "And certainly didn't expect you to bring company." "Elijah, this is Miss Sophia Sullivan," Zachary said formally. "Sophia, my brother Elijah." "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Sullivan," Elijah said, tipping his hat. though I'm mighty curious about how you came to be riding with my solitary brother. It's a long story, Zachary interjected before Sophia could respond. One that can wait until we've gotten Miss Sullivan settled. She's had a difficult few days. Understanding dawned in Elijah's eyes. Of course. Come on inside, Miss Sullivan. We can offer you a wash-up and a hot meal, at least. That sounds wonderful, Sophia said gratefully. And please, call me Sophia. The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly comfortable, with sturdy, well-made furniture and touches that spoke of a woman's hand in the past, embroidered cushions on the chairs, curtains at the windows, a braided rug before the hearth. Make yourself at home, Zachary said, somewhat awkwardly. I'll show you to a room where you can rest and clean up. Elijah, is there hot water? Always is, his brother replied. I'll bring some up, along with some towels. Zachary led Sophia upstairs to a small but pleasant bedroom. This was my mother's sewing room, he explained. We've set it up as a guest room, though we don't get many visitors out here. The room held a narrow bed, a dresser, and a rocking chair by the window that overlooked the valley. A faded quilt covered the bed, its pattern still vibrant despite the years. My mother made that, Zachary said, following her gaze. She was always making things. Said idle hands were the devil's workshop. It's beautiful, Sophia said, running her fingers over the intricate stitching. She was very talented. Yes, she was. There was a deep sadness in his voice that made Sophia turn to look at him. For a moment, she glimpsed the depth of his loss before he masked it. I'll fetch those clothes I mentioned, he said, clearing his throat. Elijah will bring the water. Take all the time you need. Supper won't be for an hour or so. Left alone, Sophia sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by everything that had happened. Just 2 days ago, she had been a passenger on a stagecoach, headed for a new life she hadn't particularly wanted but had resigned herself to. Now she was in the home of a man she barely knew, a man who had saved her life and brought her to his ranch with no apparent expectation of anything in return. Elijah arrived with the promised hot water, pouring it into a basin on the dresser. Zach said you'd been through a rough time, he commented, studying her with intelligent eyes so similar to his brother's. He didn't give details, but I can guess. The Mason gang. Sophia nodded, unsurprised that he'd figured it out. They robbed my stagecoach, killed the driver and guard. I was the only passenger. She swallowed hard, the memories still raw. They were going to throw me in the river when your brother found us. He shot the rope from their hands and drove them off. Elijah whistled softly. Always did have a knack for dramatic timing, my brother. And a soft spot for those in need, though he'd deny it. He set down fresh towels beside the basin. You're safe here, Miss Sophia. No one comes onto Young land without us knowing about it. After he left, Zachary arrived with an armful of clothing. These were my mother's, he said, setting them on the bed. They might be a bit old-fashioned, but they're clean and whole. Thank you, Sophia said softly. For everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Zachary shook his head. No need for repayment. Any decent man would have done the same. No, Sophia disagreed. They wouldn't have. Believe me, I've learned that the hard way. She met his eyes steadily. What you did was extraordinary, Zachary Young, and I won't forget it. He seemed at a loss for words, finally settling on a gruff. Get cleaned up and come down when you're ready. Elijah makes a mean venison stew. With that, he left her alone. The simple act of washing away the dirt and fear of the past days felt like a rebirth. Sophia scrubbed her skin until it glowed pink, washed her hair as best she could with the limited water, and donned one of Mrs. Young's dresses, a simple blue calico that fit reasonably well once she adjusted the ties. Looking in the small mirror above the dresser, she hardly recognized herself. The woman staring back at her seemed older, somehow, than she'd been just days ago. Her hazel eyes held shadows that hadn't been there before, and there was a new set to her jaw. She had survived. That meant something. When she descended the stairs, she found Zachary and Elijah in the kitchen, setting the table for supper. They both looked up at her entrance, and something in Zachary's expression, surprise mingled with admiration, made her cheeks warm. You look, he began, then seemed to think better of whatever he'd been about to say. Better. Rested. I feel better, she acknowledged, moving to help with the table setting. And very hungry. Supper was a simple but hearty affair: venison stew, cornbread, and canned peaches for dessert. The brothers kept the conversation light, telling stories about the ranch and asking Sophia about her life before the stagecoach robbery. They carefully avoided mention of her ordeal or their parents, sticking to safer topics. As they ate, Sophia found herself watching the interaction between the brothers. Though 4 years separated them, they moved in the easy rhythm of men who had worked side by side for years. They anticipated each other's needs, passed dishes without being asked, and communicated as much with looks as with words. After the meal, they moved to the main room where Elijah lit a lamp and Zachary built a fire in the hearth despite the warm evening. "Gets cold up here at night, even in summer," he explained, catching Sophia's questioning look. As darkness fell outside, the room took on a cozy intimacy that made Sophia acutely aware of Zachary's presence across from her. In the lamplight, his features seemed softer, less guarded than they had been on the trail. "So, Sophia," Elijah said, settling into a chair with a cup of coffee, "Zach tells me you were headed to your aunt's in Bozeman. Will you want to continue your journey once you've rested?" The question brought Sophia back to reality. Of course, she would need to move on. She couldn't impose on these men indefinitely, no matter how welcoming they'd been. "Yes, I suppose I should," she said reluctantly, "though I haven't thanked you properly for your hospitality." "No thanks needed," Elijah assured her. "It's nice having someone besides my brother for company. The Hands stay in the bunkhouse, and visitors are rare out here." "The Hands?" Sophia asked, glancing out the window where lights glowed in the distant bunkhouse. "We keep 4 men year-round," Zachary explained. "More during roundup and branding. Good men, all of them. Been with us for years. Except Jenkins," Elijah corrected. "He just joined us last month after Taylor moved east." "Right," Zachary acknowledged. "Haven't met him yet myself." The conversation drifted to ranch matters, with Elijah updating Zachary on the cattle, the condition of the north pasture, and a fence that needed mending. Sophia listened, content to be included in their circle, if only temporarily. When Elijah finally rose and announced he was turning in, Sophia realized how late it had grown. She should retire as well, but something kept her seated across from Zachary, reluctant to end this peaceful evening. "You should get some rest," Zachary said once Elijah had gone upstairs. "You've been through a lot." "So have you," she pointed out. "You've barely slept in 2 days." He shrugged. "I'm used to it. Part of the job. Hunting bounties. He poked at the fire, sending sparks up the chimney. "Not the most respectable profession, I know." "I think it depends on who you're hunting and why," Sophia said thoughtfully. "You're after the Mason gang because they hurt people, not just for the money." Zachary glanced up, surprised by her insight. "How do you figure that?" "The way you talk about them. There's something personal in it." He was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. Just when Sophia thought he wouldn't answer, he spoke softly. "They killed a friend of mine. Frank Donovan, sheriff over in Clearwater. Good man with a wife and 2 little girls." His jaw tightened. "Mason shot him in the back during a bank robbery last spring." "I'm sorry," Sophia said, understanding now the drive that had led him to track the gang for weeks. "Yeah, well." Zachary stood abruptly. "That's why I need to get back on their trail soon. They've hurt too many people already." Alarm shot through Sophia. "You're going after them again? After what happened at the river?" "That's my job," he said simply. "And now I've got a better idea of where they're operating." "But they'll be watching for you," Sophia protested. "They know your face now." "All the more reason to find them before they find me." He moved toward the stairs, clearly ending the conversation. "You should get some sleep, Sophia. We can talk more in the morning." Sophia watched him go, a cold knot of fear forming in her stomach. The thought of Zachary riding out to confront the men who had nearly killed her, who had murdered his friend, filled her with dread. In just 2 days, he had become important to her in a way she couldn't quite define. Sleep was long in coming that night, her mind filled with images of Zachary facing the Mason gang alone, of rope around her wrists, of dark water rushing beneath her. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were troubled, and she woke before dawn, restless and anxious. Unable to fall back asleep, Sophia dressed and made her way downstairs, surprised to find Elijah already in the kitchen, coffee brewing on the stove. "You're up early," he commented, pouring her a cup. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Is Zachary awake yet?" Elijah shook his head. "Still out." He usually sleeps late when he first gets home. Trail life takes it out of a man. He studied her over the rim of his cup. You're worried about him going after the Mason gang again. It wasn't a question, but Sophia nodded anyway. It seems reckless. That's Zach, Elijah said with a wry smile. Always was the reckless one. I'm the careful planner. Balances out, most times. He set his cup down. But you should know, he's good at what he does. Very good. He's brought in some of the most dangerous men in the territory. But he's just one man, Sophia argued. And the Mason gang has at least 5 members that I saw. 6, came Zachary's voice from the doorway. He stood there in trousers and an undershirt, his hair tousled from sleep. Mason, the Becker brothers, Lewis, Harding, and a new guy they call the Swede. He moved to the stove, pouring himself coffee. And yes, I'm just one man, but I don't plan to take them all on at once. That would be suicide. Then what do you plan to do? Sophia asked, trying not to stare at the way his undershirt revealed the contours of his shoulders and chest. Track them back to wherever they're holed up. Get a better count of their numbers. Then ride for the marshal and Helena. He's been wanting to organize a posse against them for months. It was a sensible plan, but it didn't ease Sophia's fears. When will you go? Few days, Zachary replied, taking a seat at the table. Need to help Eli with some things around the ranch first. And make sure you're settled. I've been thinking about that, Elijah interjected. Miss Sullivan, you mentioned you're good with horses. We've got a couple of new colts that need training. If you're interested in staying on a bit longer, maybe earning some money before you continue to your aunt's, we could use the help. Sophia blinked in surprise, looking between the brothers. You're offering me a job? If you want it, Elijah confirmed. Pay wouldn't be much, but you'd have room and board, and time to decide your next move. Zachary was watching her intently, his expression unreadable. It's up to you, he said. No obligation either way. The offer was unexpected, but not unwelcome. The thought of leaving for her aunt's a woman she barely knew and who had made it clear she was taking Sophia in out of familial duty rather than affection had been weighing on her. And the prospect of staying near Zachary, of perhaps being here when he returned from his dangerous mission, held an appeal she wasn't ready to examine too closely. I'd like that very much, she said finally. Thank you, both of you. The days that followed took on a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Mornings began early with coffee and a simple breakfast before the day's work. Sophia spent most of her time in the corral with the colts, 2 spirited yearlings that responded well to her patient handling. Zachary split his time between ranch work and preparations for his upcoming tracking expedition. Sophia often felt his eyes on her as she worked with the horses, though when she looked up, he'd quickly turn his attention elsewhere. On her 3rd evening at the ranch, Zachary joined her at the corral after supper. He leaned against the fence, watching as she spoke softly to the chestnut colt, gently stroking his neck as he grew accustomed to the saddle blanket on his back. You have a way with them, Zachary observed. Most men I know would have had that one bucking all over the corral by now. Sophia smiled, pleased by the compliment. It's about trust. Horses know when you respect them. My father taught me that. She secured the blanket and stepped back, giving the colt space to adjust to the new sensation. Your turn will come tomorrow, little one, she told the animal, patting his flank. She joined Zachary at the fence, aware of his proximity in a way that made her pulse quicken. Over the past days, her initial gratitude toward him had evolved into something deeper, more complex. She found herself watching for his smile, rare but transformative when it came. She noticed the gentleness in his hands when he worked with animals, the quiet authority he commanded without raising his voice, the way he truly listened when she spoke. Elijah says you're leaving tomorrow, she said, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. At first light, Zachary confirmed. Should be gone about a week, if all goes well. And if it doesn't go well? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Zachary turned to look at her, his expression softening. I'll be careful, Sophia. I've been doing this a long time. I know, she said, trying to keep her voice light. We'd miss you around here. Elijah and I. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or something warmer. Would you? He asked quietly. Yes, she admitted, unable to look away from his intent gaze. I would. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Then Zachary straightened, taking a step back. I should finish packing my gear, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Early start tomorrow. Of course, Sophia said, disappointment washing through her even as she told herself it was for the best. She was still recovering from her ordeal. He was about to leave on a dangerous mission. This was hardly the time for whatever had nearly happened between them. But as she watched him walk away, she couldn't silence the small voice inside her that whispered it might be the perfect time, perhaps the only time to acknowledge what was growing between them. Morning came too quickly, the sky still dark, when Sophia woke to the sounds of movement downstairs. She dressed hurriedly and descended to find Zachary checking his gear by lamplight, Elijah brewing coffee in the kitchen. You're up early, Zachary said when he spotted her. No need to see me off. I wanted to, she replied simply. She accepted a cup of coffee from Elijah and leaned against the doorframe, watching Zachary's methodical preparations. He wore his trail clothes, sturdy denim trousers, a checked shirt, and the worn leather duster she'd first seen him in. His gun belt was strapped securely around his hips, and a rifle rested against the wall nearby. When everything was packed to his satisfaction, he turned to Elijah. Remember what I said about the north pasture? Those steers need to be moved before the creek rises any higher. Already taken care of, Elijah assured him. Moved them yesterday while you were fixing the barn roof. Zachary nodded, then turned to Sophia. She expected a casual farewell, perhaps a tip of his hat. Instead, he approached her, stopping closer than was strictly proper. Take care of yourself, he said, his voice low. And keep an eye on Eli. He works too hard when I'm gone. I will, she promised. And you, come back safely. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, Sophia thought he might say something more. But he merely nodded, then reached for his hat and rifle. With a final glance back, he stepped outside into the pre-dawn darkness. Sophia followed him onto the porch, watching as he mounted his freshly saddled horse. Elijah had tactfully remained inside, giving them a moment of privacy. Zachary, she called softly as he turned his horse toward the trail. He reined in, looking back at her questioningly. Sophia hesitated, then simply said, I'll be waiting. A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his features in the gray light of early morning. I'm counting on it, he replied. Then, with a tip of his hat, he rode away, disappearing into the shadows beyond the yard. Sophia stood on the porch long after he was gone, watching the eastern sky lighten with the promise of a new day. Only when Elijah called her in for breakfast did she finally turn away, carrying with her the memory of Zachary's smile and the hope it had kindled. The days of Zachary's absence passed more slowly than Sophia would have liked. She threw herself into work, spending long hours with the colts, helping Elijah with the endless tasks of ranch life, and even taking over the cooking, much to his appreciation. If you keep feeding me like this, he told her on the fifth evening as they enjoyed a rabbit stew she'd prepared, I may never let you leave. Sophia laughed, though the comment touched on a growing uncertainty within her. The more time she spent at the Young ranch, the less she wanted to continue on to her aunt's. Here, she felt useful, valued. And if she was honest with herself, she was falling in love with more than just the place. On the seventh day, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, bringing an early dusk and the distant rumble of thunder. Sophia helped Elijah secure the animals and equipment, both of them casting frequent glances toward the trail leading to the ranch. He might have taken shelter somewhere, Elijah said, noting her worried expression. Zach's got too much sense to ride through a storm like this looks to be. Sophia nodded, though anxiety gnawed at her. Zachary had said he'd be gone about a week. Today marked 7 days since his departure, and there had been no word. The storm broke just after sundown, rain lashing against the windows as lightning split the sky. Sophia and Elijah sat in the main room, she mending a shirt by lamplight while he cleaned his rifle, both pretending a calmness neither felt. When a pounding at the door cut through a lull in the storm, they both jumped to their feet. Elijah reached the door first, yanking it open to reveal a figure leaning heavily against the doorframe, rain streaming from his duster. Zach! Elijah exclaimed, reaching out to steady his brother as he stumbled inside. What happened? Sophia rushed forward, her heart stopping at the sight of blood staining Zachary's left side. You're hurt, she gasped. It's not as bad as it looks, Zachary grunted, though his pallor and the way he clutched his side belied his words. Caught a bullet when I was leaving Mason's camp. Just a graze. Let's get you to a chair, Elijah said, supporting his brother across the room. Sophia, can you fetch the medical supplies? They're in the cupboard in the kitchen. By the time she returned with bandages, alcohol, and her sewing kit, Elijah had helped Zachary out of his duster and shirt, revealing an angry wound along his ribs. It was indeed a graze rather than a direct hit, but it was deep and clearly painful. Should have seen the other fellow, Zachary joked weakly as Sophia examined the wound. He won't be shooting at anyone again. Hold still, Sophia instructed, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. She had tended injuries before ranch life ensured that, but never one caused by violence. Never on someone she cared for so deeply. She worked methodically, cleaning the wound with alcohol, which made Zachary hiss through clenched teeth, then preparing to stitch it closed. This will hurt, she warned, threading a needle. I trust you, Zachary said simply, his eyes meeting hers with a warmth that steadied her hands. Elijah brought whiskey, which Zachary accepted gratefully, taking a long swallow before nodding for Sophia to begin. He remained stoically silent as she stitched the wound closed, though sweat beaded on his forehead and his jaw was tight with pain. When she finished, Elijah helped Zachary upstairs to his room, while Sophia prepared a light meal, knowing he would need nourishment after his ordeal. By the time she brought the food upstairs, Zachary was propped up in bed, looking exhausted but less pale. You should eat something, she said, setting the tray beside him. Then rest. Yes, madam, he replied with a ghost of his usual smile. Seems I've come home to a new boss. Someone needs to look after you, she said, trying to keep her tone light despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. Seeing him wounded, vulnerable, had shaken her more deeply than she'd expected. Now eat. Doctor's orders. She turned to leave, but his hand caught hers, his touch warm despite his weakened state. Sophia, he said softly. Thank you. The simple gratitude in his voice nearly undid her. You're welcome, she managed before slipping from the room, afraid he would see the tears gathering in her eyes. Downstairs, she found Elijah waiting for her report. He'll be fine, she assured him. The wound is clean and not too deep. He's lost some blood, but with rest and proper care, he should heal quickly. Elijah nodded, relief evident in his expression. I knew bringing you here was a good idea, he said with a tired smile. Even if Zach did have to get himself shot to prove it. Despite her concern, Sophia found herself smiling at his attempt at humor. Did he tell you what happened? With the Mason gang? Some of it, Elijah replied, gesturing for her to sit. He found their hideout an abandoned mining camp in the foothills. Counted 8 men, not 6 like he thought. He was about to leave and ride for the marshal when one of their sentries spotted him. There was a firefight. Zach killed one of them, the man who shot him, but had to flee before the others could surround him. So they're still out there, Sophia said, a chill running through her at the thought. Yes, but they'll be moving on now that their location's been compromised. Elijah sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture remarkably similar to his brother's. Zach says he got a good look at most of them, enough to give detailed descriptions to the marshal. It's not the outcome he wanted, but it's something. The storm continued through the night, rain giving way to a gentle patter against the roof as Sophia lay awake, listening for any sound from Zachary's room across the hall. She had checked on him before retiring, finding him asleep, his breathing even. Still, worry kept her from rest. Just before dawn, she rose and quietly crossed to his room, easing the door open to peek inside. To her surprise, he was awake, staring at the ceiling. You should be sleeping, she chided gently, entering the room. So should you, he countered, turning his head to look at her. Despite his pallor, his eyes were clear and alert. Did I wake you? No, she admitted, moving to his bedside. I couldn't sleep. I was worried about you. He studied her in the dim light filtering through the window. I'm tougher than I look, he said. It'll take more than a bullet graze to keep me down. So I see, Sophia replied, relieved by his improved color and stronger voice. She placed a hand on his forehead, checking for fever. His skin was warm, but not worryingly so. How's the pain? Manageable. He caught her hand as she withdrew it, holding it gently. Sophia, there's something I need to tell you. The seriousness in his tone alarmed her. What is it? Is something wrong? No, he said quickly. Nothing like that. It's just, while I was out there, tracking the Mason gang, I had a lot of time to think. About my life. About what I want. He paused, seeming to search for words. I've been hunting bounties for 4 years, ever since our parents died. It was a way to make extra money for the ranch, and then it became something else. A way to bring some justice to the territory, maybe. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, her hand still in his. You're good at it, she said. Elijah told me about the men you've brought in. Maybe, Zachary acknowledged. But it's a lonely life. Dangerous. And out there, when that bullet hit me, all I could think about was that I might never see you again. His eyes held her steadily. I don't want to be that man anymore, Sophia. The one who rides away. Her heart quickened at his words. What are you saying, Zachary? I'm saying I want to stay here. Run the ranch with Elijah. Build something that lasts. He squeezed her hand gently. And I'm hoping you might consider staying too. Sophia's breath caught. You want me to stay? As what? A smile touched his lips, transforming his tired face. Well, that depends on you. Right now, you're our horse trainer. A fine one, according to Elijah. But I was hoping, in time, you might consider becoming something more. More? She echoed, hardly daring to believe what he seemed to be suggesting. My wife, Zachary said simply. Not right away. We hardly know each other, I understand that. But I know enough to recognize what I feel for you is real, Sophia. And I hope you might feel something for me too. Joy welled up within her, unexpected and overwhelming. In the short time she'd known Zachary Young, he had saved her life, offered her a home, and shown her a kindness and respect she had nearly forgotten existed in the world. And somewhere along the way, she had fallen in love with him. I do, she whispered, tears blurring her vision. I've never met anyone like you, Zachary. You make me feel safe, but more than that, you make me feel strong. Like I can build a new life, even after everything that's happened. Relief and happiness broke across his face like sunrise. Then you'll stay? Give us a chance to see where this leads. Yes, Sophia said, certainty filling her. I'll stay. Zachary tugged gently on her hand, drawing her closer. When his lips met hers, soft and questioning, she answered with a kiss of her own, sealing a promise between them as the first light of dawn crept into the room. Summer faded into autumn, and the Young ranch settled into a new rhythm with Sophia as a permanent fixture. Her intended journey to Bozeman became unnecessary when her aunt, informed by letter of Sophia's change in plans, expressed relief that she would not be burdened with an extra mouth to feed after all. Zachary's wound healed cleanly under Sophia's care, leaving only a pale scar along his ribs. True to his word, he did not return to bounty hunting, though he rode to Helena once to give his report to the marshal. The Mason gang had indeed moved on from their hideout, but with Zachary's detailed descriptions, posses throughout the territory were on alert for them. As October painted the surrounding hills with gold and crimson, Zachary and Sophia were married in a simple ceremony on the ranch, with Elijah standing as witness and the ranch hands forming an impromptu congregation. Sophia wore a new dress that Zachary had ridden to town to purchase, and flowers gathered from the meadow beyond the north pasture adorned her hair. I never thought I'd find happiness again, she told him that evening as they stood on the porch of the ranch house, now their home. After my father died, I felt so alone in the world. Zachary's arms encircled her from behind, holding her close against the autumn chill. I felt the same way after my parents were gone, he admitted. Even with Elijah here, something was missing. I didn't know what until I saw you by that river. Sophia turned in his embrace to face him. You mean when I was bound and being dragged to my death? She asked with a raised eyebrow. Not the most romantic first meeting. I don't know, he mused, his eyes twinkling with humor. There's something to be said for making a dramatic entrance. And I did get to play the hero, shooting that rope from their hands. My hero, she agreed, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. Though I prefer you here, safe with me, rather than charging into danger. His expression sobered. I meant what I said, Sophia. Those days are behind me. This is where I belong now. With you. Winter brought snow that blanketed the ranch in pristine white, and quiet evenings before the fire, where Zachary taught Sophia to play chess, and she taught him to dance. Spring arrived with new calves in the pastures and the promise of expanded operations as Zachary and Elijah purchased additional land from a neighboring rancher who was moving east. On a warm day in late May, almost a year after Zachary had found Sophia by the river, news reached the ranch that would change their lives once more. A rider from town brought word that the Mason gang had finally been captured after a failed bank robbery in Butte. All except Mason himself were in custody. They're asking for witnesses to testify at the trial, the rider explained as he accepted coffee at the kitchen table. The marshal remembers you saw some of them, Mrs. Young. Sophia exchanged a glance with Zachary. The prospect of facing her captors again filled her with dread, but also a determination to see justice done. When would they need me? She asked. Trial's set for 3 weeks from now in Helena. We'll be there, Zachary said firmly, his hand finding Sophia's under the table. Both of us. After the rider left, they sat in silence for a long moment. I'm afraid, Sophia finally admitted. Not of testifying, but of seeing them again. Of remembering. Zachary squeezed her hand. You don't have to do this. No one would blame you for staying away. No, she said, straightening her shoulders. I need to face them. For myself, and for the others they've hurt. She placed her free hand on her stomach, where the first gentle swelling of their child was just becoming visible. For our future. Zachary's eyes widened. Though they had been hoping for a child, the confirmation still filled him with wonder. You're sure? The doctor confirmed it when I was in town last week, she said, a smile breaking through her earlier solemnity. I was waiting for the right moment to tell you. Joy swept across his face as he pulled her into his arms. Sophia, he breathed, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And to him, she was. 3 weeks later, they traveled to Helena for the trial. Sophia's testimony, clear and unwavering despite the presence of the men who had nearly killed her, helped secure convictions for all 6 gang members in custody. As she described being dragged toward the river, the courtroom fell silent, hanging on her every word. When she recounted how Zachary had ridden down and shot the rope from their hands, heads turned to look at the tall man sitting supportively beside her. Your actions saved not only Mrs. Young's life, the judge told Zachary after the verdict was delivered, but likely many others by helping to bring these criminals to justice. The territory owes you a debt of gratitude. I was just in the right place at the right time, Zachary replied modestly. And I found something far more valuable than any bounty that day. As they left the courthouse, stepping into the bright June sunshine, Sophia felt as though a chapter of her life had finally closed. The men who had terrorized her would spend years in prison. Mason was still at large, but with his gang dismantled, his days of freedom were surely numbered. Ready to go home? Zachary asked, helping her into their wagon. Home. The word carried such weight now, such meaning. Not just a place, but the life they were building together, the child growing within her, the love that had blossomed from the most unlikely of beginnings. Yes, she said, her hand finding his. I'm ready. The journey back to the ranch took them past the spot where the Snake River cut through the valley. Sophia asked Zachary to stop, and they stood together on the bluff overlooking the water that had nearly been her grave. It's strange, she said as they watched the river flow past, sparkling in the summer sun. If those men hadn't captured me, if they hadn't brought me here that day, we never would have met. I don't believe that, Zachary said, his arm around her waist. Some things are meant to be, Sophia. One way or another. I think we would have found each other. She leaned into him, finding strength in his certainty. Either way, I'm grateful for how things turned out. Not for what they did, but for where it led. To us, he said simply. To us. She agreed, turning away from the river toward the future that awaited them. Autumn came again, painting the mountains with gold and red. On a clear October morning, with the first dusting of snow on the distant peaks, Sophia gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth, after Zachary's mother. Elijah, now the proud uncle, carved a cradle that sat beside their bed, and the ranch hands, gruff men more comfortable with cattle than babies, brought handmade gifts and awkward congratulations. As Sophia sat on the porch with Elizabeth in her arms, watching Zachary and Elijah work in the yard below, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. From the terror of that day by the river to the joy of this moment, it seemed impossible that only a year and a half had passed. What are you thinking about? Zachary asked, climbing the steps to join her. He was dusty from work, but his smile was as bright as the day she'd married him. "About how quickly life can change," she replied, making room for him beside her. "About how sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best." He nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. "I got word from town today," he said after a moment. "They caught Mason crossing into Wyoming territory. He'll stand trial in Cheyenne next month." Sophia absorbed the news, feeling a final knot of tension she hadn't even realized she was carrying loosen within her. "Good," she said simply. "Then it's truly over." "It's been over for a long time," Zachary said, gently touching their daughter's cheek. "This is what matters now. This is our future." Elizabeth yawned and blinked sleepily, her tiny fingers curling around her father's much larger one. The gesture, so simple yet so profound, brought tears to Sophia's eyes. "Our future," she echoed, leaning against Zachary's shoulder as the autumn sun warmed them. "I like the sound of that." 5 years passed, bringing changes both to the young ranch and to the territory itself. Montana achieved statehood in 1889, and the railroad extended its reach, bringing new settlers and opportunities. The Young brothers expanded their operation, adding sheep to their cattle holdings and purchasing additional land as neighboring ranches sold out to larger interests. Elizabeth grew into a spirited child with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined nature. She was joined by a brother, James, born on a winter night with snow piled high against the windows and Elijah riding through a blizzard to fetch the doctor. Zachary never returned to bounty hunting, though his reputation lingered. Occasionally men would arrive at the ranch seeking the legendary tracker who had helped bring down the Mason gang, only to find a contented rancher more interested in discussing cattle prices than reliving past glories. On a warm summer evening in 1893, as sunset painted the western sky with shades of orange and purple, Zachary and Sophia sat on the expanded porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard with the puppies from their shepherd dog's recent litter. 15 years, Zachary mused, his arm around Sophia's shoulders. "That's how long my parents had together before the fever took them. I used to think that was too short a time." He turned to look at her, the love in his eyes undimmed by the passing years. "Now I know that even a lifetime with you wouldn't be enough." Sophia leaned into him, her heart full. "We've been blessed," she said softly. "With each other, with our children, with all of this." She gestured to the prosperous ranch that stretched before them, the result of years of hard work and wise decisions. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been there that day, by the river?" Zachary asked, voicing a question he'd never asked before. Sophia was quiet for a moment, considering. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I look at everything we've built together, and I know that whatever forces brought us together that day, fate, providence, sheer luck, I'm grateful for them." "As am I," Zachary said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Every single day. Below them in the yard, Elizabeth's laughter rang out as one of the puppies licked her face, while James toddled after another, his chubby hands reaching for the elusive ball of fur. The sun dipped lower behind the mountains, casting long shadows across land that had witnessed both their darkest moments and their greatest joys. In that peaceful moment, with the man she loved beside her and their children's laughter floating on the evening air, Sophia thought back to that desperate day by the Snake River. How close she had come to death, and how wonderfully, unexpectedly alive she now was. She had been dragged toward the riverbank until the cowboy rode down and shot the rope from their hands. And in that moment of salvation, neither of them could have imagined the life they would build together, a life richer and more fulfilling than either had dared to dream.